name's Marina and welcome back to The Mum Show. Today we are going to be talking about how to cultivate positive sibling relationships within your home. So grab yourself a cup of tea, get yourself comfortable and let's get started. Welcome back to The Mum Show. My name's Marina and as always I am joined by Pastor Claire Hooper and child therapist Emma Brown. Now today we're going to have a chat about sibling relationships. Anyone who has more than one child will know that sibling relationships can be the most fun, complicated and at times slightly crazy relationships to be maintaining in a household. So we're going to be having a little chat about that, ladies, and I'm quite excited because all three of us have multiple siblings.
It's true.
So we've kind of got the experience of being siblings and of being parents and trying to manage all of that. And now you're one of three girls, right? What's your dynamic in your home?
Well, we're a bit shared. We're us, theirs and ours. We're a bit of a blended family.
Okay.
So there were 5 originally. I sadly lost a sister a number of years ago. And then me and my sister are from my mum and my dad. And then we have there's 2 others that joined us later with my new dad as well. Does that make sense?
So what does that, what are we totaling at?
5. There's 5 of us together.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 of us.
So I'm one of 4 girls, which is always good fun, as you can imagine. Yeah. Actually, I love having sisters. I've always loved having sisters. I used to feel really, really lucky that I constantly had a playmate around. And I remember growing up thinking, oh, that's good fun because I'm quite a sociable person. But I did also have an inner desire to be unique and to stand out and to feel like I was so different from my sisters. You know, I'd often say that I'm different from the rest of my sisters. And I think part of that comes down to the fact that at very important events like dressing up parties, my mum would dress us all exactly the same. Take a look at this. Yeah, so there you go.
That is amazing.
Babushka dolls.
Babushka dolls.
There's a really cool Instagram account, or a few of them, that do that now. Your mum would be in vogue.
Well, there you go. She was on point.
I'll show you the Instagram account.
I think it was just like, and you know what really annoyed me about that was that particular year, like my mum had gone to all this effort and Rebecca won and she was a cat. And all she had was a black leotard and tights on and whiskers. And I was like, we should have got that. And I challenged the authorities.
I bet you did.
Why? Why did I not win? And they said, we've only got 1 fudge bar and there's 4 of you. So that is it.
Just, do you know what?
There would have been no problem with that, would there?
Well, do you know what? That leads me on to a funny story that when we grew up, as you say, I'm one of 3 girls. And my mum is she was a dental hygienist. She's retired now, and so she had a real thing, obviously, about us all having, no sweets and cleaning our teeth. But we were allowed Saturday night sweets, okay, a treat a week. You can imagine how exciting this idea was. But we had 1 tube of Smarties, which is, kind of multicoloured candy in a tube. And 1 tube of Smarties between 3 of us equals 11 each. And they just enough to fill an egg cup. So we had an egg cup full of Smarties.
Perfect. My parents used to make us share. I once found a £1 coin. Can you imagine when you're just little, finding a £1 coin on the floor? And my dad said, wonderful, 25p each.
Oh.
25p each. That was, well, we did go to the corner shop and buy sweets and all the rest of it, but it was always sharing. But it's funny, isn't it? Because when you've got siblings, whether you are a sibling or you're raising a sibling, it's really easy to be blended all into one pile of kids, isn't it? I used to be called one of the Smiths all the time. Yeah, well, you would because you're a Smith. Yeah, well, you do think that because you're a Smith, or, and that used to frustrate me a bit. But like, what sort of impact do you think that has on kids as they're growing up? Because especially if it comes from the parents.
Yeah, well, I think there's two things there. That what you're describing is how you as a sibling group were observed from the outside, but I think from within as parents, I think it's absolutely completely natural and normal that we compare our children. I mean, I will hold my hands up and admit that I did it probably from the moment I found out I was pregnant with my second daughter. You know, to that, you know, how sick I was. Was I as sick as I was with my eldest? Am I the same shape? What sense do I have of this baby inside me? Is it as active? Or we've got a lazy one here, we've got an active one there. And it's completely normal for us as human beings to kind of make comparisons from ourselves to other people. So, of course, we're going to do that with our children. And some of that is normal and harmless, but I think we do need to understand that it can have actually a really big impact on them. And quite a negative one. There was a study that I came across of, you know, parents having a view of their 4-year-old's intellectual ability at the age of 4, so before they've started school, has an absolute direct impact on how they perform at the age of 16 in terms of their report cards and the grades that they get.
That's really big, isn't it?
Because it's the messages that sometimes, you know, kind of harmless or unintentional messages that we give our children about, oh, you're the one that's the academic, you're the sporty one, and how we label them can have a real lasting impact on their future. So we can't underestimate the power of the comparisons that we make between our children.
It's somehow pulling out that individuality, isn't it, of our kids, even though, because there are often loads of similarities as well within siblings, aren't there? And you've walked that stage before and you've kind of walked it with another child, and so you feel like you're walking it again. But of course, that's their first time of going through that. But do you think it impacts the relationships between siblings to be kind of living in a place of comparisons and that sort of thing?
I think, like Emma, that I think it's natural that you compare, but when you make it into competition, that's different. So when you say that comparison means that you then have to change something to be like that other person, it's okay to go like that, yeah, I feel different, or your sister was doing this at this time, or your brother was at this level. It naturally gives you a benchmark to work to. You know whether you almost use it, don't you, to help you in your parenting. Am I doing the right thing? Am I getting it right? Am I giving them the same amount of attention? Am I giving them the same opportunities? But it's when then you make it into competition in, like, you must be better because your sister was like this, or you need to be doing this because that's what your other sibling did, or they never did that, so you shouldn't be doing that. That makes them fight against each other, and that's not healthy. I mean, there's plenty of occasions in the Bible when it talks about when those relationships of siblings broke down and it went all horribly wrong. It's the actual ability to work together with those differences together that I think is something that we should be instilling in our children where we can, when we can.
Yeah, but actually, if you look at one of those biblical sibling relationships, if we look at Jacob and Esau, for instance, the driving force behind that was the mum. It's the mum going, quick, we need to make you stronger and braver and bigger and bolder and blah, blah, blah. And the mum was the one that was pushing all that rivalry.
And that's not just being a healthy comparison, it was she made them competitive against each other. Families are supposed to, families are supposed to work together. There's a scripture that says that blessed is the man who has many arrows in his bow because he can defend his enemy better. And that's because children are supposed to be a blessing and help you, I suppose, defend your enemy, which would be, the enemy, but also to live a better life. Like you have that element in there, not to work against each other.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think it is really powerful, the messages that we give our children, and it can be lifelong as well. I mean, as in my role as a psychotherapist, in my work with adults, I often have people that are kind of still held or still feel kind of imprisoned really by some of the labels and the comparisons that were made between them and their siblings, and it can have a huge impact on their kind of identity, their self-esteem, their kind of sense of not feeling good enough. And it is, sometimes we say, why can't you do what your sister, why can't you be more like your sister, in an area? And actually we do that because we want to motivate them. Yeah. But it doesn't motivate them, it completely demotivates them. So when we're told that we're not good enough, our tendency is to kind of believe that, and that holds us back. So there's a lack of motivation, there's increased anxiety, and it causes rifts in the relationships between our children when we do that as well.
Do you think that it always comes from a parent or from an exterior, or do you think kids have got eyes? They see what's going on. They know if they look different, if they're not doing as well, or if a sibling is particularly talented, or if a sibling's passionate about something but they haven't found anything to be passionate about yet. So it's not even just as a parent looking at ways to make sure we don't do that, but it's actually about being proactive in what we do.
Yeah, I think celebrating individuality as parents. So we can't just, our children aren't the same. And although, yes, we can kind of have a culture of fairness in our families, we can't treat them the same because they're not the same individuals.
No,
and what kind of parenting works for one child doesn't work for another. So I think we need to be authentic and honest with our children about the differences between them, and honour those differences and celebrate the uniqueness of our children as well. Find opportunities where we can celebrate one of our children being a comic and making us all laugh. I love that about you. Thank you so much. You always have managed to make us laugh, and that should be celebrated and talked about.
I have some gorgeous siblings for you to meet. Let's take a moment to hear from the kids.
Brilliant.
And action! Me and my siblings are similar because we have a lot of things in common, like we're funny, we're smart, and we've got common ages. She is 3 years older than me and she likes to do stuff with me. She likes the music that I like.
Oh, we all like music.
Yeah, we all like to dance. We're all out there. We're all in this together. I don't know that song.
What are some of the differences in the family?
There's an age difference between us. Obviously, if you're younger, you like to play with like Barbies or all that stuff, and then when you're older, you like to just hang out with all your mates and friends, and don't like to hang out with us because they think we're boring and go on their electronics. Yeah, because they're different to them. We like different dances, we like different music, and that's it. Oh, and different sports. Oh yeah. Most of us are energetic, most of us are not.
How would you like to be more like your siblings?
I like to be like my brother and sisters in the way that they're like fast and can do backflips and gymnastics and can dance good. I would like to be more like my siblings because like my brother, he's very mature and I want to grow up to be like him and Ella because she's very pretty. I want to be more like Eva because she's a good gymnast and she can do everything in gymnastics.
Yeah, no, when you get older, you'll be beating me in gymnastics, I'm just saying.
Do you think that you get treated differently?
I don't think I get treated differently. We all get treated fairly. Yeah. They sometimes might treat us differently if we're bad behaviour. We'll treat us differently like that, but not in like favouritism. We won't treat us differently like that. They'll treat us fairly. Because we all love each other the same way. Yes.
How do you show your siblings that you love them?
Well, the tradition what goes around in our family is we all like to give each other hugs. We all touch each other like that. And like that. And like call each other 24/7. What does that mean? That we like to call each other a lot.
How lovely are those girls? What I love about those girls actually is that they're a blended family. Yeah. So they've got 7 kids in total. Wow. Which is huge, and a big age span as well. So I think they span in ages from
16, I think, isn't it down to, is it Iana the youngest?
Yeah, down to like 5 or which is massive, but they have created so much care and so much kindness. And what I quite enjoyed, like in the piece that they were doing there, was that they seemed to have a real family culture. I like that we have a tradition in our family.
Our tradition is to hug.
And we cuddle each other, which is just so lovely, isn't it? But I think it's interesting because in our sibling relationships, we go to places that we don't go with anybody else, you know. And I do remember thinking as a teenager how nice it would be that me and my sister would like sit on top of each other on the sofa, because you wouldn't necessarily do that with anybody else, but then oof, you can get angry with your siblings and you can despise them. And it almost promotes a really good model for being able to try out relationships for the real world, doesn't it? For people who you don't necessarily have that, at the end of the day, we all love each other, or at the end of the day, we all cuddle each other. You can kind of, like a child raising up in that environment can play around with boundaries a little bit, can't they?
Absolutely. And the other interesting thing is that there's quite a bit of research that shows us that apart from kind of our attachment relationship, which is the quality of the relationship between the child and the parent, the sibling relationship and the quality of our relationship with our sibling has an absolute direct impact on how we learn to have, how healthy our future relationships are with our partner, with our own children. It has a really, really significant impact, because actually when you think about it, our sibling relationships are usually the longest relationships that we have. A bit like you, I've lost one of my sisters now, but ordinarily they're because I'm the youngest, I've never been around without my siblings.
Yeah.
And they grow with you into adulthood. So they're the longest relationships, and I think that we try out all sorts of and learn so many social skills and relationship rules and ideals through our relationship with our siblings.
Biblically, when we're exhorted to love each other, it's referred to as brothers and sisters, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's kind of seen as a relationship that we want to be striving towards. So it's valuable then.
It is really, really valuable. Yeah.
I think we relate to Jesus in the way that we relate to our brothers and sisters. I think that he has very much got that kind of relationship. I would go, Father God is like, Father, and Holy Spirit tends to be more nurture and coach, and like mother figure would be, character and helping you live. But Jesus takes that role of the brother in us. And I think how we have those relationships with our siblings helps us how we relate to Jesus as well. How that plays out in everybody's life is very, very different, but I would say that you can see definitely when you're pastoring people, those that have an intimate and I suppose a good relationship with Jesus, I would be able to communicate to him in a way. You very often find that they've had a really good relationship with their siblings growing up. I mean, I know, it's not written down anywhere, but it just tends to be
in the Book of Clare.
In the Book of Clare. We should write that.
I think it's interesting because my mum grew up in a really big family, and my dad was an only child. And when we were being raised, my dad would often be like, oh, guys, you've got to be kind to each other, you've got to be nice to each other, you've got to get on. And he had these phrases, it's not what you say, it's the way that you say it. And it was stressful for him. And we used to be like, chill out, Dad, we love each other, it's fine. But it would grieve him almost because he didn't have sibling relationships to compare to. So we must have just sounded really cruel to each other at times. Whereas my mum was totally chilled out about it. Like she was just like, ugh, they'll be fine, they're just brothers and sisters. But what do you think?
That's funny.
Because there's going to be a lot of people watching
I had the
this.
same experience with Matt,
Do you?
Matt and the kids. Yeah, it's really funny. Just as you're saying it, I'm like, I was from a big family where we talked over each other, and it didn't mean anything. It just was just day-to-day life. And actually his upbringing is very different, and that has bothered him at times when our kids have, and I've gone, leave them to it, they'll sort it out. They don't mean anything by it.
So what are the hallmarks then? What are the things that you say, right, this is a no-go area because you're going to become damaged in your sibling relationship, and this is cool, that's fine, you can worry about that. Bearing in mind that children are egocentric, teens are egocentric, and they've got to try and figure out that egocentricity in a very, very close quarters and community. What would you say are the things people need to be looking out for?
Well, again, there's a really strong piece of research in terms of the biggest predictor of a healthy adult sibling relationship is how much fun and playfulness happens during early childhood between the siblings. And that's regardless of how much conflict there is. So you can scrap and scrap and scrap with your sibling, and still have a healthy adult relationship with them, as long as you had an equal balance of fun and you were able to kind of play with them. So as parents, we need to really foster that. We need to foster opportunities for our children to just play with each other, to kind of, kind of tap into their imaginative, playful, creative parts of themselves. You know, I know that for me at the moment, with a 14 and a 10-year-old, my 10-year-old is grieving her big sister at the moment because she no longer wants to play and do all the things that she used to do. But, you know, I talked to Erin quite a bit about, you know, that those experiences are yours and Libby's. No one will ever take them away from you. They'll be yours, and they're the foundation of your relationship going forwards. And yes, at the moment you're into different things, but just give it time, be patient. But then giving them opportunities, like the weekend, I just said to Libby, right, you've seen your friends all week, how about setting aside a couple of hours to just be with Erin? What you can choose what you do with her, but this is what's, you know, I'd like you to do that. So she's like, yeah, no problem. And they had a whale of a time just baking and making a right mess of the kitchen. But I could just, like, you know, the sound of their laughter together
So true.
was, you know, was really important to me, because I think the danger is when children, you know, the real danger point for sibling relationships is where they ignore each other.
Yeah.
So where there's kind of
Absolutely.
that just, you know, just separateness. I think that's when, as parents, we need to think, hang on, this is not okay, we need to step in and do something here.
I can see how that research really correlates with where Galatians talks about growing in the fruits of the Spirit. You know, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, and how play and how you have to leave something behind to grow in those things. Earlier on in the scripture, I haven't got time to read it all out, but it says what you have to leave behind, like quarrelling, gossip, you know, bad behaviour, all of those things that you leave behind. But you kind of only learn that when you learn to be more joyful or more patient or more kind or more gentle, and playing with your siblings and, like, actually being allowed to explore your boundaries, what's okay, what's not okay. And I think then having parents that help you and say, actually, no, that's below the belt, you're not allowed to say those sorts of things. We have a rule in our house, certain words, you're not allowed to label each other. So you're not allowed to say stupid or idiot or things like that that put a label on the other person. Absolutely. It's okay to go, you really made me cross then. I don't like what you did. And we don't mind a bit of passion and, you know, like, I'm not so bothered even about emotion, showing emotion, but it's the then labeling or allowing it to become bitterness that allows it then to, you know, to flow into, like, retaliation and revenge, and how kids can be if you don't help them to grow in the fruits of the Spirit. And so that study, I'm going to look into that. Fascinating. So how play then develops their relationship when they're older.
It's that thing, I like what you were saying about leaving behind bitterness and leaving that behind. It's really interesting. I was reading in Dan Siegel's book, as I do like to read. I do like to get up to what he's saying. Fascinating books. The Whole Brain Child.
Yeah.
I think it was that one. I've read a few of his works, but he was sharing about how recognise and affirm what they're feeling, but not leave it as a set narrative. So, for instance, my little boy is very passionate, and he'll go, I hate Lilia! She's taken my husky dog! I hate her! Like that.
Just like that.
Just like that. And I'll go, oh, that's really upset you. I can see you're so upset about that. You feel really frustrated with her. And you were playing really nicely earlier, just to kind of subtly bring in that kind of, this is not a long-term thing. To try and move on quickly, because
keep short count.
Instead of, because actually I guess what you could do, and maybe a natural instinct for a parent would be to say, oh, no, you do not hate Lilia, don't be so ridiculous. You don't hate her, what a dreadful thing to say, because that's not validating his feeling in that moment. Of course he doesn't hate her, but in that moment, the feelings he's got, he doesn't know what to do with them, and he needs us as parents to kind of acknowledge and help soothe and make sense of those feelings for him.
So powerful, isn't it, in those moments to stop and just go, that's rubbish, isn't it? Don't say that, because that's also not a very nice thing to say. You know, you can, but it's taking a pause. Exactly.
Could you do it differently?
It's taking the pause to go, I'm with you in this. I feel your pain. That toy, you spent ages building that, didn't you?
Connect. to redirect.
Yeah, love that.
We did that in the first series, didn't we? But it's so important that we acknowledge the intention and the feeling behind our children's distress, whether that's in the middle of a sibling argument or whether it's something else. It's incredibly important. And then once they're soothed enough to be able to kind of, then we can bring in the boundaries and the limit setting and helping them realise that perhaps there's another way of going about resolving their upset.
It's coming back to what we were saying at the beginning, as well as that need for feeling unique, that need for a solid own identity. I'm not belonging to other people. I am my own person. Actually being able to respond when there's sibling conflict, not like all get on. Everyone will be okay. Everyone be nice to each other, or everyone get out. Actually responding to the person in that moment and really connecting with them, like you say, is going to be crucial, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it can counteract then, therefore, those kind of other more damaging kind of feelings that we worry about with, like, the low self-esteem and the kind of anxiety that our children feel when they feel inferior or not good enough to their sibling who is seemingly much better at sports or getting higher grades than them. It's how do we help them to feel valued as themselves and learn to love themselves as well.
So let's look at that for a moment then, because that can be a big thing in families. If somebody's got more than one child and they can see that one of them is feeling inferior and struggling, what would you say is a good approach for a parent to take to just help build that child up?
Well, first of all, I'd say be authentic and honest. So there's no point if you know that your child struggles with sport or gymnastics. We don't want to, kids can really see through parent lies, okay? So we don't want to sugarcoat. We cannot wrap our children up in bubble wrap to keep them safe from the realities of the world and realities of their own strengths as well and limitations. I think we do need to be honest. But again, it's connecting with the feeling. I can see that you're really frustrated that you can't quite do it in the way that your sister does it. But actually, let's think about what you can do. And so it's kind of acknowledging and not sugarcoating it, but then finding other ways in which you can celebrate their uniqueness and their strengths. And looking at opportunities to help them grow with their strengths as well and build up their self-esteem.
Yeah, that's really good. Did you have anything you thought there, Claire?
Yeah, I suppose we've got three very different, I know we've all got very different children, but I'm just thinking of them as three very different individuals, what we've done and said. We'll often single them out on purpose. So when they're feeling like that, left out, we do single them out not to make them feel worse, but in fact the opposite, to actually have the family do what the family should and come around them. So we'll say, okay, your sister's feeling like this at the moment and you could really help by behaving in this way. Or, I've noticed that what could we do as a family to help you? Or, and there's nothing worse than having that conversation where one of them goes, and she did this, and she said that, and she said the other. I just go, wait a minute, I'll talk to you about you, and I'll talk to her about her, and then we'll have a conversation together. So we are that family that will talk to everybody, pause, get everybody together and on the same page again as much as possible. Different opinions, different ways of doing things, but a family unified is like a much more positive, just much more positive environment.
It reminds me of that. Have you heard the term love bombing?
No.
So I was reading about it the other day. It's the concept of taking one child out, giving them your sole attention and just throwing as much love on them by just being completely connected, completely present, completely with them. And I think there's so much value in that. Some of my favourite times with my parents was definitely when they'd say, right, come on, Marina, let's go for a walk, or let's go and do something else. And it's just those little moments that can just make you go, I'm not just one of many, I'm me, which can be really nice. Love bombing. So there you go. Go and try it. Do some love bombing with your kids. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be back very soon with a new episode of The Mum Show. In the meantime, have a good week and be blessed.
Hello parents, don't forget to say hello. We're at florishcollective.co.uk. Bye!